صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. اللهم صل على محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه، يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي، ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك فدخلت تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم، وسلم لمن سالمهم، وعدو لمن عاداهم، ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا ربي، ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا ربي، أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم، قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام، ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله، إنه نعم، قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي: إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا: يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، پردہ شب میں میری میت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، پسلیاں توڑی گئی کیسے یہ بتلاؤں گی میں، حشر کے میدان میں بھی اس حال میں آؤں گی میں، ہاتھ پہلو سے نہ تم میرا ہٹانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، اور وہ مصیبت آپ نے اچھا ہوا دیکھا نہیں، اب میں سیدھے ہاتھ سے تسبیح پڑھ سکتی نہیں، ایسا کن فزنے ہے مارا تازیانہ یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، کہتی ہے زینب یہ مجھ سے دیکھ کر چہرہ میرا، آپ کے رخسار پر یہ نیل ہے کیسا پرا، میں نے کھایا ہے تماچا مت بتانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، تازیانے کی اذیت کا اٹھانا ایک طرف، وہ تماچے قتل محسن در جلانا ایک طرف، سب سے مشکل تھا مگر در بار جانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، جب میری تلقین پر نہ یاد کر لینا ذرا، در کے گرنے سے میرا بازو بھی ہے ٹوٹا ہوا، میرے شانوں کو ذرا دھیرے ہلانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، چاہے آ جائے قیامت مجھ سے یہ وعدہ کرو، جب تلک مولا میرے شبیر کی مرضی نہ ہو، تب تلک میرا جنازہ مت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، کربلا میں جب میرے مظلوم پر خنجر چلے، پیاس کے عالم میں وہ غازی کو جب آواز دے، میں بھی آؤں گی وہاں پر تم بھی آنا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی۔ سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن
Please welcome Mulla Riyaz with 3 loud salawats ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Before I begin, there are a lot of our brothers and sisters who are not well, and some of them are in the hospital, especially our brother Abbas Bhai Shivji. So I request you to recite Surah Fatiha Shifai Marda. Bismillah. Al-Fatiha Shifai Marda. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وصل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر. وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يعدي حقه المجتهدون. الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الصلاة والسلام على الرسول المسدد والمصطفى الأمجد سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وبآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم ومبغضيهم وغاصب حقوقهم من ليلنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى أما بعد فقد قال فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها: صبت علي مصائب لو أنها صبت على الأيام سرنا ليالي. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent and the Merciful, the one who is so merciful that He gives us the intellect and He gives us the opportunity to worship Him, to be closer to Him. On that note, I say Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This night, my brothers and sisters, the commemoration of the Shahada and the martyrdom of the greatest lady on earth, who is known as the Lady of Light or the Lady of Heaven. As we call it, the greatest lady in the universe, none other than the daughter of our Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. And we commemorate her untimely departure from this earth. It is said to know that she was a teenager when she was martyred, when she was killed. And there is a reason why we commemorate, and there is a reason why we should remember, and there is a reason why Allah placed her where she is today and her status and position, brothers and sisters. And I think it's important for us to have this very clearly laid out so that not only for our own faith, that when we remember her and when we cry for her or smile for her or we give her congratulations on her achievements, it is really a reflection for us that we come closer to her teachings of what she represented on this earth while she was alive, mere 18 years old. So tonight, inshallah, given the time, I would like to touch on the fundamental principles, hopefully, by remembering how and what she stood for on this earth. Now, this is not an ordinary, it's not an ordinary task, we call it. ये कोई आम या ordinary काम नहीं है जो मजलूमा ने किया है. I mean, it's not an ordinary task that she performed. It's a phenomenal task at that time. After the if we take ourselves 1400 years back, you can visualize that the Prophet has died. He has left this earth. And now the machinery that has started in enmity of the Ahlul Bayt, and how she stood up that machinery, and what a price that she had to pay for it. This is why we cry for her. See, she has left an uswa, means she has left an example for us to follow, that where there is injustice, how would you stand in front of injustice? How would you dig your heels? As much as we can, isko digest karne ki koshish kare, means we have to digest the principles that she stood on. Now there is a matter that I wish to discuss today, and this is pivotal around this time in history. And what is the matter? And that matter is the case of her property. I mean, this is the case of her property, which is very important to talk about. Sometimes people think that, oh God, how much more? The Muslims, Ayyam-e Fatimiyya, they settle and they say, oh God, now these Shias are going to talk about Fadak and Fadak and Fadak, the garden of Fadak. And we talk about Fadak for a few simple reasons. Muslims don't realize that whatever narrations that Muslims have in their books, when we detail Fadak more, we find that they don't add up. Whatever details that we have, and when we dig into that, why she went to ask for her property. And you see, we see when we dig into the books, when we dig into history, we say in Urdu, kuch to hai jiski pardadari hai. There is something, a golmaal. There is something that is being hidden by the majority of the Muslims, and they don't want to talk about it. And this riwayat of, it's telling us this riwayat of Fadak, this case of Fadak, the way it transpired, the full scenario in the Muslim history has been narrated and related. And the way they have been related by the general Muslim authorities, when you dig deep into the system of the books, they don't add up. That's why we say there is some golmaal here. There is something wrong. And this is where I started thinking, when I was preparing this lecture, and I started thinking that where exactly is the truth? Where exactly is the truth? And this is true, that if any person who has any common sense, if a person analyzes without bias and prejudice, if anyone analyzes this case that she produced before Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa, if anyone analyzes this, they will know that this is a source of inspiration, a source of guidance for us, is a source of inspiration. Now, when we talk about Fadak, it can be viewed in a couple of scenarios. The historical background, for example, how this was acquired, how it came into the Prophet's possession, when, where, and how he gifted it to his daughter, etc., etc. Now, Fadak, it's a garden. It was a fertile agricultural land. Today it's there. I don't know in what condition it is, but it is about 90 minutes drive from Medina in the north. And at that time, it was a very fertile land. The income of Fadak, it's not an ordinary income, 24,000 gold coins per year. It was enough to support the whole of the Ahlul Bayt in Medina. And all that income that was coming, Bibi Fatima used to donate it to the destitutes. 24,000 gold coins at that time and this time. It's not a joke. It's not a small amount. Now, when we talk about Fadak, it can be viewed in a couple of historical background and all that sort of thing. Fadak, if seen on the flip side of the coin, it has a political context, and Fadak also has a symbolic context. There are both contexts here. And I'm sure I'm talking to intelligent people in front of me, however few. But you have to understand what I'm going to say today and what Bibi Fatima did and how did she literally dug in her heels demanding her rights in front of that fraud government who had all the military power at their command. And what did they do to subdue this lady? One lady. One lady. Now, the symbolic context we will discuss some other time. Today, what I wish to enlighten ourselves is the angle of the political aspect of Fadak, the political concept of Fadak. Not only about the person who's claimed Khilafah, but the politics of Hadith as well. You see, our faith depends on two major items for us. One is Quran and one is Hadith. I'm just reminding you this because I am going to quote a lot of this Quran and Hadith from now. And our faith depends mainly on either Quran or Hadith. Now, see, आजकल जो हमारे rules बनते हैं, the rules that we have, the laws that are in effect, उसमें भी, in those laws also there's politics involved. For example, and I'm not talking about the governmental politics. For example, right from the opening of this center, to the closing of this center, everything revolves around politics. Now, I'm not talking about Liberal Party or the Democratic Party or the BJP or the PPP. No, not that sort of politics. Right from opening this center to the closing of the center is revolving around politics. So when I say there's a politic dimension, it doesn't mean the politics which the ruling party has. That has an effect. But every aspect of full politics has an effect on lives of the Muslims. If we do a postmortem on autopsy of this case of Fadak today, we are at a distance of about 1400 years ago. The distance is 1400, 1400 साल का जो फासला है. This is a historical event that transpired 1400 years ago, or even from the revelation of the Quran, from Nabi, from all these aspects. Safe to say that we are in 1444 AH now. So we have a margin or a distance of more than 1400 years. Now, there is a system which keeps us close to the Islamic way of life, as I said, and that system that we have, whereby there are two supreme rulings, two supreme authorities. One is Quran, as I said, and one is Hadith. We have to remember this. And today, whatever we have in the Islamic laws of jurisprudence or on any Islamic system of governance to prove an authenticity of any issue, this system in our madhab, in the Muslim society or in the Islamic circles demands two proof of evidence, either from the Quran or either from the Hadith. That is from traditions of the Prophet. For example, Quran, I prayed on time. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. Quran says, for a mu'min, the best time to pray is so. Quran clearly says that you have to pray. You see, this is the fundamental issue. I prayed on time. Now, judging from the Quran, by my actions are authenticated. It's clear. And that you did the right thing. Quran tells me, Aqimus Salah, that means your Muslim way of life. Salah is the pillar. And then there is fasting. And then, of course, there is charity. And then there is, of course, a struggle, jihad, wa kadhalik, etc. Now, according to Quran, say, for example, now comes a big question before I delve deep into what Bibi Fatima did. Quran, I witnessed an incident whereby an innocent man was unjustly abused or killed on the roadside. You know the case of George Floyd? Huh? It is very fresh. He was being killed and there were witnesses around. And what is the law? The law is that the witnesses who were there and did not to do anything and accessory to murder is deserving of the same punishment as the murderer does. George Floyd's case is so, open. There were witnesses and he was being killed. And nobody did, they took a video. Yes. And then it went viral. But I witnessed an incident whereby an innocent man is killed. According to the Quran and Hadith, what is my duty? What is my duty at that time? Was I supposed to say something? Or just ignore as if nothing has happened, just stand by and watch? Or what am I supposed to do? Now, this becomes an ethical issue. It's a moral and ethical issue. Whom to ask or to turn to, of course, of action that I'm supposed to take. In that scenario, the machinery of hadith, the traditions of the Prophet come into play. The narrations by the Prophet come into play in this case of scenario. And you see, we are all believers of Sayyidul Shuhada, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam just did not close his eyes and ignore the injustice that was taking place right in front of his eyes. And he stood up, he rose accordingly. And this is exactly what Bibi Fatima Zahra did. The son is following the footsteps of the mother. Bibi Fatima Zahra, when she saw that her rights and her husband's rights are being trampled upon, she spoke up and she defied the supreme authority. Then these directions and actions instruct me that morally and ethically we are bound to act. I see that that man is being killed. I am a witness to it. And I saw it's an innocent man. I don't know his background, whether he's a criminal, he's not a criminal. No. I am supposed to act to the best of my ability. Even in that process, if I'm pushed around and if I'm being tossed around, doesn't matter. See, because an accessory to murder deserves the same punishment as the murderer does. Because why? Because you did not act to protect that person. That is moral and ethical issues, and this emanates from the tradition of the Prophet. So what am I trying to say is that now we are so far in time from what transpired 1400 years ago. You know what, my brothers and sisters, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What I'm doing to do is open a Pandora's box tonight. And very openly. I am open, I'm going to open that Pandora's box. And when we open that Pandora's box, the Muslims don't like it. The Muslims don't like this. Now, we are far from what happened 1400 years. So far in time still, but still this incident and this event is still a guiding factor in my life after this 1400 years. Which measures my actions, if my life is according to Islamic principles or not, and the two factors of these guiding principles, one Quran and one Hadith. On that note, I have chosen to speak on these two guiding factions, Quran. Now you see there are two principles here. When we say Quran, Hadith. Now it's either Quran versus Hadith or Quran and Hadith. You see, there's two different vocabularies here that I'm using. Quran versus Hadith, for example. Now I begin. If Quran and Hadith are at par or in unison with each other, they instruct me to act on an issue. No conflict, there is no conflict between what Quran says and the Hadith that I hear from the Prophet, then my life is very easy. It's the actions are very easy. You know, it's very easy to, and my actions are very justified because there is no conflict between what the hadith says and what the Quran says. But on the other hand, what if I find that a narration or a hadith that is contrary to the teachings of Quran? Then what? Both Quran and hadith are they are unified in unison, then it's easy for our guidance. The problem, my brothers and sisters, it begins when the Quran and hadith, they clash. This is known as Quran versus hadith. When they contradict each other, then what am I supposed to do? What is my course of action? Please try to understand what I'm telling you tonight, my brothers and sisters. I know I'm talking to an intellectual crowd here. Now today, in this time, this issue has become a humongous issue for each and every one of us, the general Muslims I'm talking about. It's a big issue. Now I come to the core issue concerning Sayyida Fatema Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa Muhammad. The most disputed and distorted issue is the case of the Garden of Fadak, the agricultural land of Fadak by the Muslims. Has Sayyida Fatema addressed this issue in her khutbah? Yes, addressing the first caliph, and there we find a guiding principle. There we find a guiding principle. Oh, but they say, Muslims, they say, oh, it was just a small piece of land, maybe 10 by 10 square meters of 15 by 15. And there were 2-3 date palms. So we asked them, if that was the case, then why didn't Abu Bakr give her back? It was such a small issue. They kept on telling us it was just a small piece of land with 1 or 2 trees in there. So I said, then Abu Bakr should not have any problem in giving it back to her because it's no use to the state anyways. No, there was something more to it. And she is addressing the khutbah, addressing the first caliph that we find. She has in her khutbah that she spoke addressing Abu Bakr and all, not only Abu Bakr, the mosque was full of companions, the Sahaba. Each and every Sahaba of the Prophet was there. The gathering inside the mosque, Masjidun Nabawi, is packed. And now comes the hadith. The unfortunate part is that the general Muslims, I will give you an example. The general Muslims have different understanding of what is Quran and what is hadith. I'm talking about general Muslims. I'm not talking about the scholars from the school of thought of Ahlul Bayt. I'm talking about general Muslims. For a majority of the Muslims, and this is true, you will see, that the mainstream Muslims, for them, what is the Quran? What is the Quran for them? Quran for them is a bunch of letters and a bunch of verses and a bunch of paragraphs embound in a book, which till today the Muslims restrict and translate at face value, word by word. It's a very dangerous situation. This is what the Muslims do. They translate it at face value, word by word. Translating, the verses, the vocabulary, that's it. And apart from that, they do not want to dig into the intricacies of the verses. I will give you an example. I just was looking through the tafsir of the Muslim scholars. I'm not talking about Allama Tabatabai or Allama Puya, our school of thought. I was looking at Surah Isra, and strange enough, you find this Surah number 1772. Go and check it out today. وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى وَأَضَلُّ السَّبِيلَ. And the Muslims have translated, now, does it make sense to you? Now see. They say those who are blind on this earth will be resurrected blind on the day of judgment, and they will be deviating from their path. And that's what that's all. Does this make sense? We have a blind person. He is pious. He loves the Quran. So it means that he is blind in this earth, and then he will be resurrected blind, and then he'll be shoved aside on the day of judgment. Is it true? Does it make sense? And this is what the Muslims do. وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى وَأَضَلُّ السَّبِيلَ. This is the translation that they make. But we who belong to the Ahlul Bayt and Shia school of thought, for us, Quran and its verses are not taken at face value. It's deeper than the superficial meaning. Every sentence and every verse of the Quran for us has a history. It has got layers and layers and layers of deep meaning. It's like a lotus flower with layers and layers and layers of petal. For us, Quran doesn't begin begin with ba and end with sin. No. For there are parallel layers for us that are deep, with deep hidden meanings in there. So they're just more than just the letters and the vocabulary and the verses. And simultaneously, we believe that this Quran is the living, it's kind of a living entity which has got a ruh and spirit. If you delve into the Quran, it speaks to you. Believe me. If you delve into the Quran, it speaks to you. And hadith is the same thing. When Muslims have got a hadith. I don't want to go into details. I'm not going to give you a contra answer to that. They say, oh, the Prophet said, لو كان نبي بعدي هو في عمر ibn Khattab. Now it doesn't make sense that after me, if there was a prophet, it would have been Umar ibn Khattab. What are you supposed to answer? How does it conflict with the Quran? I'm not discussing that today. But think about it. What does the Quran say? That this hadith is wrong. It's a fabricated hadith. لو كان نبي بعدي هو في عمر ibn Khattab. This is a prevalent hadith, and they take pride in it. If there was any prophet after me, it would have been Umar. But I do not want, I'm just, tingling your mind to check out that why this hadith comes in clash directly with the Quran. So now, there are different understandings between the group of Muslims and a wide spectrum. Simultaneously, the science of hadith. For the mainstream Muslims, what is hadith? As I said, the words and the sayings of the Prophet. Now, you see the difference here between us and Muslims. That the words and the sayings of the Prophet, or the action of the Prophet, or the consent and tacit approval of the Prophet is hadith. And that we agree. That what the Prophet said, and the tacit approval means anything that was the action that was done by someone in front of the Prophet, and the Prophet did not approve of it, did not say, no, don't do that. And if he kept silent, then we connect it that it is a part of hadith. The Prophet is okay with that action. Now, any action was performed by Muslims in front of him, he did not object and nullify the action. It was kind of a tacit approval. This is also hadith. Now, for majority of the Muslims, words, actions, consent of the Prophet, this is for general Muslims, this comprises of hadith. But for us, the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, hadith is more than that. For us, hadith is not only words, action, and consent of the Prophet, but the words and actions and consent of the 12 Imams who came after the Prophet, who were appointed by the Prophet. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What the Muslims have done is that they have restricted themselves to the life of the Prophet for 23 years only. They take actions of the Prophet, hadith of the Prophet, what happened in the 23 years. But for us, it's something different. So normal Muslims, they have 23 years of material from the life of the Prophet. But for us, there is a material of 250 years, my friends. 250 years till the major occultation of our Imam Hujjat alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So the torso, the body, the torso of our hadith is humongous. It is huge. So hadith and Quran have different opinions and different group of Muslims. They have different opinions amongst the Muslim. So now let's take a scenario where hadith contradicts the Quran. And there is a golden rule. That golden rule is, then Quran stands paramount. When hadith comes into a direct conflict with the Quran, you throw this hadith out of the window. Put it on the wall. That contradictory hadith is thrown out the window. Any hadith narrated by any of the great imam or personality, this is the golden rule of our sixth imam, Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He says, even if that hadith says, Qala Ja'farun Sadiq, and you see that this hadith is conflicting the Quran, he says, throw it out. Don't believe me. This is as far as our sixth imam goes. Throw it out. Unacceptable. This is the golden rule that was taught and embedded by our sixth imam. Now we approach a very precious terrain here. I'll tell you why. We have to sift and analyze all these hadiths. They teach us inequality in our society. There are hadiths that literally in the Muslim books, they teach us inequality in the society. There are some hadiths that I can mention, what Sahih Bukhari and Muslim and all have written about Aisha and Prophet, what they did. I mean, I'm even ashamed to talk about it from this pulpit. And these are the hadiths that are in the books, in the Muslim books. Now, if we come across such hadiths, it has to be measured by the Quranic barometer. That is what our Aimma, especially our sixth Imam alayhi salam, impressed upon us. That you come across a hadith contradicting the values defined in Quran, throw it out of the window. Now, question is, now on this night, Martyrdom of Sayyida Fatema Zahra salamullahi alayha, that Islamic theology and the methodology of the science of hadith, it is a huge field in the teachings of jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. This is known as hadith and science. Now, when did this commence? This background I'm giving you, and then I'm coming to the point, what did Sayyida Fatema do to guide us? I'm coming to a point. So we are looking, when did this commence? The study of science of hadith, methodology of hadith. When did the Muslims start studying the science of hadith? And you will think after the Prophet's demise? No. You'll be surprised that till 90 years after the Prophet's demise, it was forbidden to speak any hadith of the Prophet. And at that time, if anyone spoke of any hadith, he was beaten up and put in jail. This was the time of first Khalifa, second Khalifa, third Khalifa, Muawiyah. 90 years. People were forbidden to speak any hadith. Because why? It opens up a Pandora's box, because then Ghadir will come out. You see, the hadith of Ghadir will come out. You see? So they had put a kind of a gag on people's mouth, that if you talk about the Prophet's traditions, you'll be thrown into jail. Now we have, practically the science of hadith started to be preached or to be learned and to be taught 150 years after the demise of the Prophet. This came out in the time of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. At that time, various different schools of thought, mushrooming schools of thought of Abu Hanifa, Imam al-Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, different schools of thought, they popped up. So practically 150 years after the Prophet, you have a whole subject coming up, because the moment the first caliph took power, he ordered, this is so surprising, and sometimes, it's appalling. He made a command to all the believers, all the Muslims in Medina, in Mecca, everywhere, that whoever has got a tradition of the Prophet written down, because they were writing the tradition of the Prophet with time, and what time did the Prophet say, at what occasion, everything was recorded. You see the devious mind of these people. So the first, and to be the Khalifa, next one, they issued a decree that whoever brings in all the hadiths, bring it over and we'll give you rewards for it. So the people were overjoyed because they had written down on parchments, on the skins of sheep, and everything, and people brought it from their houses in order that we are going to get some reward. And guess what? All this parchment was put into a pile, and then it was burnt, and no one received any reward. So they made sure that no hadith remains in anyone's house. You see the devious mind, how the government worked at that time? They brought them in the pretext that if you bring these hadiths, we are going to reward you. And unfortunately, people, simple-minded people like you and me, and they thought, yeah, we'll get something out of the government, some stipends. They got all burnt and they were told, go back. Get lost. Go back to your work. And they destroyed everything that people had in everyone's house. But people had memorized it as well. I mean, they could not destroy that. But everything that was written was destroyed. And for 90 years, this was prohibited to be talked about. Now, practically 150 years after the Prophet, you have a whole subject of the science of hadith, Islamic circles coming up, Islamic circle, which is known as the methodology of hadith. Today, even go to Hausa, you go to even any Muslim school of thought in Saudi Arabia or Al-Azhar, there is a methodology of hadith they teach you there. In our Hausa and Qom, Najaf and everywhere, this is taught. Now we have a crucial point, thought-provoking intellectual formula, that this science of hadith commenced approximately after the Prophet. Please stay with me, my brothers and sisters, because I am going to tell you what Bibi Fatima did. Listen to this. Janabe Fatima is the very first intellectual Muslim individual who introduced the science of hadith and methodology right in front of Abu Bakr in his caliph, after they had destroyed all the hadith. She's the first intellectual lady, and she happens to be a woman. She happens to be a woman. And this is the first defiant act of Bibi Fatima. When they were gagged in talking about hadith, and here she comes challenging those hadiths that are contradictory to the Quran. Now let me put it this way. That the masters of Islamic theology or Islamic sciences came way, way later. As I said, 150 years, 160 years. Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maliki, all these four schools of thought, they popped up in the time of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. And this intellectual lady, 10 days after the demise of the Prophet, she is teaching and presenting that if ever you come across any Muslim narrating any hadith or presents any hadith to you, then don't just accept it silently. Don't accept it silently. Don't accept it quietly. Challenge that hadith. Challenge it again and again against the Quran. Then accept or outright reject it. And this was a direct defiant to the injunctions of the government. And I consider this as an intellectual empowerment of women, by the way. What she has done is an intellectual empowerment of women, way, way before the Islamic theology was developed as a field of science, like 150 years after. Now, what is Janabe Fatima teaching us? Now, take yourselves back 1400 years in Masjid al-Nabawi. Fatima is standing before a house full of companions, a congregation full of companions of the Prophet, and the government of that time facing boldly the person who's sitting on a usurped seat of Fadak. And the first thing that they did was nationalize that garden of that agricultural land of Fadak. This is what they did. It was nationalized by the illegitimate government of the time. And the first Khalifa says, when she came to present her case, and he asks, what have you come for? And he says, I've come back to take my property. This was given to me by my Prophet, and I have title deeds to prove it. So, he says, Fatima, I've heard your father say. Now, this is again another challenge that Bibi Fatima gave. He says, I've heard your father say, نحن معاشرة الأنبياء لا نرث ولا نرث ما تركنا صدقة. The reply was that's why we are told, think before you speak. Think before you speak. Because the speech that you speak will have repercussions at another time. That's why we are told that think before you speak. And he says, oh Fatima, I have heard from the Prophet, he told me that we, the group, نحن معاشرة الأنبياء is what? A group of prophets. We are a group of prophets. Mu'asharatul Anbiya, the lot of our prophets, we do not leave any inheritance behind. What we possess belongs as a sadaqah and charity to the followers, means to be given to the Muslims. See. Now, Janabi Sayyida in her khutbah, she doesn't act timid. She doesn't act timid. She doesn't say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, is that what my father said? Sorry, I'm going to go back home. She didn't say that. She didn't act timid. Oh, I'm not asking for my rights anymore. On the contrary, she dig her heels in, defying the first Khalifa in her heels, and challenges the liar. What did she do? As a woman, she taught the Muslim ladies that you just do not take any verbal diarrhea from anyone and go home. That, oh, sorry, my mistake. You question it. She taught us you question it. And how do you question it? The prevailing caliph narrated only one hadith, and he was apparently the only one who heard it. So Bibi Fatima, first of all, she asked the congregation, have you all heard this hadith? There is caliph sitting on the throne, and here is congregation full, mosque of Prophet is full. And they all denied that, no, we haven't heard. So it's only one person against hundreds. And then there came out two ladies. One was his daughter Aisha. She said, oh, yes, of course I heard it. And the daughter of Umar, who was married to the Prophet, and said, so three individuals against a congregation of hundreds of Sahaba. They said, no, we haven't heard it. So Abu Bakr says, no, it was a private conversation. It was a private conversation. So here, only one hadith. And as we say, Bibi Fatima replied him, in Urdu we say, muh tor jawab. Fatima replied him, she quotes 5 verses from the Quran. She said, hey, wait a minute, hold it. Yabna Abi Kuhafa, his father's name is Kuhafa. So, oh son of Kuhafa, she addresses him, the son of Kuhafa, Afi kitabillahi at-tarisa abak, wala arisu abi. That addressing Abu Bakr, that is it written in the Quran that you, as Abu Bakr, you can inherit your father Kuhafa, and me, the daughter of the Prophet, I cannot inherit my father? Number one. See how bold she is. Is it written in the Quran? And then she says, if that is the case, she says, لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا فَرِيًّا. Means this is something unique. You said something very contradicting. Fariya means unique, contradicting, doesn't make sense. This is something that does not make sense. Fariya means something, as I said, doesn't add up. Kuch golmaal hai, yani kuch to hai jiski pardadari hai, as we say in Urdu. There is something behind the curtain. I don't think this is right. What you said is not correct. It's not right. On what account? She's asking, on what account? From the book of Allah? Fi kitabillah? You said and quoted from my father, but is it in the book of Allah that you can actually legitimize this? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا فَرِيًّا. What you are saying is contradicting the Quran. أَفْعَلَ عَمَدٍ تَرَكْتُ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. With all confidence she addresses those seated in the congregation, and she says to all of them that you people, have you thrown the Quran behind your backs? Means have you gotten rid of the Quran? Have you, there are 2 words, 2 vocabularies in Arabic. Amadan and sahwan. Amadan means purposely. As we say in Gujarati, jani joine. In Swahili we say maksudi. Amadan. Sahwan is by mistake. I'm sorry, I forgot. So she says, you have Amadan, that all of you seated here, congregation, are you all a party to this horrendous conspiracy that's going on? That purposely that you have left the Quran and thrown it against the wall? You know, sometimes when I was reading this, I really got goosebumps. That right of property, she has the right of property. You see any laws that you have, even today here, you have title deeds with you, and I say this property is mine, I have to produce evidence, not you, that this property is mine. Look at what's happening in the court of Abu Bakr. She has the title deeds, and he is saying that the prophets do not leave any inheritance behind. Ajib. They have to prove that this is ours. The government has to prove, not her. But now we see it's in the reverse. And when I see this, Ya Allah, when I imagine, I tremble with what courage and what bravery she had to pay a heavy price, my brothers. I'm coming to the Messiah, and I will talk about what she had to pay the price for, what happened to her. So she turned to the whole congregation, Afala Amadin, means have you left the book of God? Have you thrown the book of God behind your backs? Are you wholeheartedly a party to this conspiracy? Taraktu kitab Allah? Have you abandoned the kitab al-Quran, the words of Allah? Are you all in it? Are you all in it? Is that man talking by himself? Is this man talking by himself? Are all you in consent with what he is talking? She's asking them. وَتَمَنْتُهُمْ وَرَعَى ظُهُورُهُمْ. Have you thrown the Quran behind your backs? وَرَعَى ظُهُور. Zuhur is back. That you have thrown the Quran. Is that what you decided to do? Is yaqul. Have you forgotten these verses? And she started quoting verse by verse by verse. I don't want to go into details because it'll be too much, but I'll give you an example of what she said. She opened up first ayah that she said, Nabi Sulaiman inherited Dawood. She said, وَوَرِثَ سُلَيْمَانَ دَاوُودَ وَقَالَ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ وَأُوتِينَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ عَلِّمْنَا مِنَ الطَّيْرِ وَأُوتِينَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ إِنَّ هَذَا وَهُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْمُبِينُ. She said, number one, Nabi Sulaiman, Prophet Sulaiman, Solomon, inherited Dawood, his father. And then Nabi Sulaiman says that it went as far as the God granted that grace on us that we could understand the talks, the speech of the birds and the animals. So here, number one, that Solomon, he is a prophet, and you said the whole group of prophet. Number one, Sulaiman inherited Dawood. Surah Maryam, known as Surah Al-Rahmah, beautiful surah. Beautiful surah. This surah, the contents of this surah is full of mercy and compassion. You know, the pregnant ladies, Muslim ladies, have been told that when they are pregnant, they recite this surah for the pregnancy to be easier on them. And this surah begins, the title ayah is Zikru Rahmati Rabbika Abduhu Zakaria Iznada Rabbuhu Nida'an Khafiyya. This is how Nabi Zakaria was talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah begins with a positive viber note. Hope. Hope. This is the surah of hope. It is a very positive surah. Nabi Zacharias, as he's known as in Bible, he says, my bones, Ya Allah, my bones have aged. My hairs have turned gray, a spread gray across my head. Walam akun du'aika rabbi shaqiyya, means, my Lord, but still I will not refrain myself in supplication to you, Ya Allah. Means I will not stop making dua. Which dua? And I know that I will never be disappointed from your mercy. Then Nabi Zakaria says, وَإِنِّي خِفْتُ الْمَوَالِيَ مِنْ وَرَائِي وَكَانَتِ امْرَأَتِي آقِرًا فَحَبْلِ مِنْ لَدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا. He says, I fear, I am scared. You know mawali? In Urdu we say mawali, thugs. But in Quranic language, it is almost like thugs. But it is mawali, it is an encompassing vocabulary which can be used for friends and family. Those friends and family who are opportunist and selfish, that they just want something out of you. They want something out of you. And he says, وَإِنِّي خِفْتُ الْمَوَالِيَ مِنْ وَرَائِي, that he says, I fear, I'm scared of the mawaliya. Mawaliya means friends and those family members who hang around with you with an ulterior motive, that whatever they can squeeze out of you, they will squeeze out of. And Nabi Zakaria utters, Inni khiftul mawaliya min warai, my Lord, I am scared of these people who pretend to love me. My family members and my friends, I am scared of all these people who are around me, selfish and opportunistic, and my wife has reached at that age whereby she cannot conceive. They are both 90 years old. Habli min ladunka, Allah, grant me an heir, inheritor, grant me a child. Yarithuni warithu min ali Yaqub. Grant me a child who inherits me. Inherits ali Yaqub means the lineage of Yaqub, Nabi Yaqub. They were from the lineage of Nabi Yaqub, Jacob. Now here is the question. What was Zakaria afraid of? The question is, what was the Prophet Zechariah afraid of? If we ponder over this verse, Inni khiftul mawaliya, ordinary Muslims have translated that an heir who will inherit prophethood from me. So Zakaria is a Nabi and he requests an heir who will also be a Nabi. That is the inheritance. But you see, in that ignorance, the Muslims have forgotten that when a Nabi gets a child, that child is born a Nabi. He is a Nabi from by birth. He is not anointed after 50 years. When our Prophet was born, every prophet that is born is a Nabi by birth. You see Nabi Isa's case? When he was in his cradle, and when they asked Maryam that what have you brought here without a father? And she pointed towards him. And what Nabi Isa, he is a baby hardly 2 days old, and that baby spoke. وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. That Allah, inni Abdullahi, atani al-kitab, وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا. That I am a servant of God. Atani, Allah has given me a book, and I have been endowed on you as your prophet. You see, Quran, that when a child is born in the Nabi's house, a child born as a prophet, he will be born as a prophet whom Allah has endowed him from childhood. And then, you see, on the contrary, we reject this notion that it was not for Nabuwwat to be continued. No. Because why? What was Zakaria afraid of? If we dig into history, it tells us Zakaria was a very rich man. He was the chief rabbi of the Jews. Nabi Zakaria, Prophet Zechariah, was a chief rabbi of the Jews. And he wasn't afraid that he will be robbed of his prophethood or his intelligence or his spiritual. Can I say today that whatever knowledge of me, someone can rob my knowledge? Someone can rob my intellect? How foolish it is to think that I can be robbed of my knowledge and my intellect. You and I cannot be robbed of our intellect, of our knowledge, character, can we? Now, people cannot steal my piousness and my values. They cannot steal. So the ultimate answer is, he was very rich. He had tons of money. He was the chief rabbi of the temple, and at that time, according to the Jewish traditions, they used to endow the chief rabbi with magnificent gifts and money, so expensive gifts. So consequentially, he had a lot of money floating around. And he was afraid that if this money goes into the wrong hands, it will spell a disaster, because with this money, there was charity being done, the poor being fed, the destitutes helped. And if this money falls into the wrong hands, and his wife, Zachariah's wife in Bible, she's known as Elizabeth. She was a descendant in the lineage of Nabi Sulaiman. Nabi Sulaiman was the richest of all the prophets. So that wealth that came down in the lineage of Sulaiman, Elizabeth was the one who received it. She inherited it. So it's a double jeopardy kind of thing. Zechariah, Nabi Zechariah, was so rich. And to add to it, Elizabeth brought her own wealth. So the combined wealth was unimaginable. So that was why he was asking for an heir who will inherit this wealth. He'll be a prophet, but who will inherit this wealth, and this wealth will go to a useful purpose. It will not fall into corrupt people. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It will not be for personal gains. Now this is how I can, the khutbah is so long, it's in 3 parts. One, she addresses the people and talks about Tawheed and the prophethood. And then she talks about her own fadak. And then she talks about the rights of Imam Ali, how you have usurped it. You see, she is talking about 3 principles of our faith. As we say, Tawheed, Nubuwat, and Qiyamah. And Imamat and Qiyamah. All the faith of Usul ad-Din she's talking about in this khutbah. In this khutbah, it's kind of pregnant with so much of meaning that a person like me, I cannot understand even a quarter of the vocabulary. Whatever I've understood is from the scholars and from the books. And that's it, my brothers and sisters. This is the tragedy that transpired. And for this, she was punished in a brutal way. And I'll wrap it up. The tragedy of Fatima to Zahra is therefore heart-rending. 18 years old, grieving for her father. Now remember, she's pregnant 6 months with a son that was endowed. His name was given by Rasulullah himself. When Lady Fatima conceived the baby, the Prophet was alive. And the Holy Prophet said, I would like to name him. And of course, Imam Ali and Lady Fatima were honored that the Prophet named this child, as in case of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and Bibi Zainab and Kulsum. So the Prophet himself named him Muhsin. This baby was named Muhsin, the fetus. Had he been born, he would have been in the lineage of Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and Muhsin, infallible. And why not? He is the son of Ali and Fatima. So Lady Fatima was pregnant, and a pregnant woman is always treated in a very special manner. Have you seen? You got into the transit rail, bus, how are pregnant women treated, my brothers and sisters? You go to the malls, in the shops, on the street, someone sees a pregnant woman in public transport, they will always volunteer to give their seats to her. And Fatima Zahra, instead of being treated with respect, instead of treated with delicacy, instead of being offered a consolation for the loss of her father, the Holy Prophet, she has to go around the houses of the Ansar for 40 nights. The hadith says for 40 nights to ask for the right of Imam Ali. She approached each and every house in Medina, knock on their doors. She's pregnant. She's knocking and looking for support for her husband, that you have pledged an allegiance. They would open the door and say, Fatima, what brings you to our house? And they said, Fatima, you remember the covenant that you made with my father on the day of Ghadir? She is talking to each and every household in Medina. I'm giving you history that most of the scholars do not like to give out because it creates fitna. This is not fitna. This is, I've taken out from the history books itself. And I'm talking to people who believe here. And that Ghadir, the day of Ghadir, 75 days away. I mean, you have usurped the right of my husband. Only 75 days away, you pledged allegiance to her. From the death of Rasulullah, it's only 75 days. And you stood in broad daylight under the scorching sun and pledged your allegiance to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Where are you today? She's going knocking at the doors of each and every house in Medina. She did not keep quiet. You see the boldness and the courage of this woman? What are you doing today? Not only did they break their allegiance, their covenant with with Fatima Zahra, but they attacked and ambushed her home. This is the price that she had to pay for it. Zubair, the cousin of Imam Ali, says, the riwayat is from Zubair. He's a companion of the Prophet. And he is kind of a member of Ahlul Bayt, in the far sense. He's the cousin of Imam Ali. Zubair says he came out of the house of Fatima on that day, and he looked at there were spectators everywhere. I mean, there was a congregation, throngs of people, looking towards the house of Fatima Zahra. He says it kills you. It's heart-rending. Honestly, you know, when we mention the tragedy of Fatima, often we talk about the wall, the door, the nail, but the reality is that there were bigger tragedies that were levied and put on Bibi Fatima Zahra. Fatima, who is the central figure, for example, in Ayatul Tathir, the verse that proves the infallibility and the inerrant nature of Fatima. She was accused. You know what she was done? I am sure you have not heard this. She was accused of stealing money from the treasury. Abu Bakr accused her of stealing money from the treasury. In the public treasury, Allahu Akbar. I mean, how far can you go? How far can you go? I mean, I cannot describe the words. Abu Bakr says to her, listen, I respect you and I honor you. I'll give you all my money. But to give you from the public treasury, I cannot do that. Did Fatima come and ask you money from the public treasury? She never did ask. But this is what is written in the books. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Really? Fatima asking for money from a person like you? From the public treasury? This is a tragedy in itself. Another tragedy that is worth crying was that when Fatima Zahra, towards the end of her life, refused to receive the first and second Khalifa, her usurpers and her oppressors, they came and asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to grant them permission, and Imam says, sorry, it is not in my jurisdiction for you to come and see her. Now look at the words that history has written. You need to hear this because you never hear this. Look at the words that history has written. Imam says, it's not in my jurisdiction for you to come see her. She herself has to give permission for you to enter. So what happened? Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa, began crying. He started crying. You know, it was crocodile tears. It's a show, of course. He started crying that Fatima is not granting us an audience. The second one looks at him, at his friend. Look at him and he says, why are you crying? He looks at Abu Bakr and he says, why are you crying? He says, well, did you see that Fatima refused to grant us an audience with her? He said, that he says to Abu Bakr that you are crying because some woman, look at it, some woman didn't grant you an audience with her, and this woman makes you cry and she makes you laugh. The same person, by the way, he said, the akimin kalamin nisa, means the second says this is an old wives' tales. What are you talking about? This the prophethood and the tawheed and Yawm al-Qiyamah and all that sort of things. What are you talking about? These are old wives' tales. This is in the books. This is what the second person said. Subhanallah. So now we rest with the situation. It's a crime that the victim, the crime that was levied upon her, she never spoke about the details. Why? Number one, out of modesty. There are some crimes that are so macabre and they are so unspeakable and so horrendous that Fatima never couldn't speak about it, what they did to her. Even Imams of the Ahlul Bayt always spoke in a subtle way with great pain and tears in their eyes, what she went through. The victim never spoke, but the perpetrator spoke of it and boasted about it. Those who performed this crime, they spoke about it and they boasted about it. To put down a woman. One poet says, in Arabic, I don't want to say in Arabic, I will give you just the gist of what this Arabic in Arabic the poetry is for us to try and figure out exactly what happened in those few moments of the ambush against the house of Fatima. We have to ask the witnesses. Now he says, no, metaphorically speaking, he says, who are the witnesses? He says, the first witness is the nail in the door. I would ask the nail that you stayed in the house of Fatima for so many years. How dare you penetrate the chest of Fatima? How can you penetrate the chest of Fatima? That's one witness. Second witness, he says, the front porch of Fatima Zahra. Oh, porch of Fatima, what is this blood that I see staining you? Is this the blood of the chest of Fatima? Or is it the blood of that fetus that was destroyed by the second kill? Oh, porch, how dare you crush the daughter of Rasulullah against the wall, the door. He's asking the door, metaphorically. What are the witnesses do we have? The firewood that was assembled. And he says, oh firewood, how dare you burn down the house of Fatima Zahra, where the Prophet used to stand and say, Assalamu alaikum ya Ahl Baytin Nubuwwah. So the poet says we are looking for witness in exactly what happened, but there was one witness that we cannot question, and who is this witness? Is Fatima Zahra herself is the first witness. She says, Ya Allah, I ask you in the name of my son Hassan and his bitter cries for me, وَبُكَائِهِ عَلَيْهِ. After she was returning from the court of Abu Bakr, and she had that title deed in her hands. Abu Bakr eventually gave it to her. And she was returning, and Imam Hassan alayhi salam was a witness to all these travesties of justice. Imagine, he is only 5-year-old child who was holding the hand of his mother, Fatima. A mother holds the hand of her son. Why? Because he doesn't want to run off in the street. She is afraid that he will run off in the streets, terrified and terrorized. And this witness was holding his mother's hand, or rather the mother was holding his hand, so as to protect him. And yet all of a sudden, he says, Imam Hassan, this is riwayat of Imam Hassan, he says, I saw the alleyway of our house become dark. The alleyway, the street that was always lighted by the sun, all of a sudden became dark. And I looked up, and there were hundreds of thugs that were mercenaries. They were brought by Abu Bakr and Umar from the time of Bani Aslam, and they were known to be notorious and violent. They were brought in to quell the uprising of one woman, one lady, Fatima Zahra. And they couldn't stand and challenge them. Suddenly, Imam Hassan says the alleyway was illuminated with sun shining, became dark with hundreds of these thugs approaching to attack my mother, Fatima Zahra. He said, Fatima, the second Khalifa says, Fatima, what is in your hands? She said, Omar, this is the title deed that has been granted by your friend who is sitting in our seat of the throne. So he said, what's written in it? She said, I convinced him that the farmland of Fadak should be returned to its rightful owners. And he said, Fatima, a'atini dhalika al-'atf. He says, Fatima, give me that piece of paper, give me that parchment. And she said, no way. So he said to his companions, Kunfud, Ya Kunfud, adribha. Oh Kunfud, beat her up on the streets. His Kunfud beat her up. Umar gave the order, and the history says more than 100 people. They ambushed one lady and one child, 5 years old. They all ambushed Fatima Zahra, beating her. And I've said this before, that you cannot kill a human being with a slap across the face, my brothers. But when it is not just a slap, but rather hundreds of thugs ganging up on her, attacking her from every angle, what happens to her? Beating her with scabbard, whipping her, beating her with sheath of sword. Do you know what is a sheath made of? It is made of from wood. It is made from leather. all hard material. They ganged upon her. And so now Fatima is holding the son of her Hassan, and the child, she is down. They are kicking her. She's on the floor. And they are kicking her, and they are bashing her on the ribs. And here is the child now trying to raise her from the grounds. And he says, Imam Hassan says, Mama, please get up, Lord, let's go to our house. ألا ولعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا على محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر طابع له على ذلك ماتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے اور قبر بھی ٹوٹی ہے پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے اور قبر بھی ٹوٹی ہے زہرا کی غریبی حیدر کی غریبی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے حق مانگنے جو زہرا حق مانگنے جو زہرا دربار میں گئی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی آواز آ رہی ہے میں بنت مصطفیٰ ہوں بابا کے کلمہ گویو میں ہی تو فاطمہ ہوں پہچاننے سے دنیا پہچاننے سے دنیا انکار کر رہی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے سن کر سلام حیدر کوئی نہیں ہے رکتا واجب نہیں سمجھتا کوئی جواب دینا افسوس فاطمہ بھی افسوس فاطمہ بھی یہ بات جانتی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے کہتی ہے رو کے زہرا جانے نہ دوں گی تنہا پٹ کے میں مرتضیٰ کے ہے ہاتھ سیدہ کا اب ہے کسی کا درہ اب ہے کسی کا درہ اور دختر نبی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے ایک کوچ میں پہنچ کر دیکھا ہے مجتبیٰ نے ظالم نے ضرب ماری کیسے خدا ہی جانے بنت نبی زمیں پر بنت نبی زمیں پر غش کھا کے گر پڑی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے یہ غربت علی ہے پہلو بھی ہے شکستہ ہاتھوں پہ بھی ہے چھالے ہے آپ کی امانت اب آپ کے حوالے. یہ کہہ کے مرتضیٰ نے میت نبی کو دی ہے. یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے. کافی ہے بس یہ فکرہ رونے کو زندگی بھر, ہاتھوں کو اپنے اکثر کہتے تھے ملک حیدر. خیبر شکن کی زوجہ, خیبر شکن کی زوجہ گھٹ گھٹ کے مر گئی ہے. یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے. کیسے لکھے تکلم غربت علی ولی کی, زوجہ صحابیوں کے دربار میں گئی تھی. بیٹی شرابیوں کے دربار میں گئی ہے. یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے, یہ غربت علی ہے.
یا سے فاطمہ زہرا, فاطمہ زہرا, زہرا فاطمہ زہرا, فاطمہ زہرا. یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا. اے میری بی بی, اے میری بی بی, تیرے در پہ استغاثہ ہے, تیرا ممنون میری شہزادی یہ جہاں سارا ہے. یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا. تو ہمیں حفظ اور امان دے دے, اپنی چادر کا سائبہ دے دے. تیری قدرت میں کیا نہیں بی بی, تو جسے چاہے دو جہاں دے دے. یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا. اے میری بی بی, اے میری بی بی, آنسوؤں میں دعا مانگی ہے, تیری تسبیح پر کے دل نے تجھے پکارا ہے. یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا. اے میری بی بی, اے میری بی بی, تیرے بچوں کا غم مناتے ہیں, اپنی اولاد سے کہیں بڑھ کے غم یہ پیارا ہے. یا زہرا, یا زہرا, یا زہرا. تجھ کو امت نے یوں ستایا ہے, मर्गे मोहसिन पे भी रुलाया है। तुझको बाबा के बाद उम्मत ने हाय दरबार में बुलाया है। या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या ज़हरा है मेरी बीबी, है मेरी बीबी, कितने सदमे उठाए हैं तूने। जीते जी तुझको मेरी शहजादी गम ने मारा है। या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या ज़हरा या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु। السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ممتحنة امتحنك الذي خلقك فوجدك لما امتحنك صابرا. أنا لك مصدق صابر على ما أتى به أبوك ووصيه صلوات الله عليهما. وأنا أسألك إن كنت صدقتك إلا الحقتني بتصديقي لهما، لتسر نفسي فاشهدي أني ظاهر بولايتك وولاية آل بيتك صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أخيك أبا الفضل العباس وأختك زينب وبنتك سكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولى، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. السلام عليك وعلى أختك فاطمة المأسومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر، واجعلنا الله من شيعتك وعوانك والمستشهدين بين يدي. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتيه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين، لتعجيل الفرج ولقضاء الحوائج ولشفاء المرضى، وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد.